African President Cyril Ramaphosa says his country is in talks with a U.S. trade representative to reduce tariffs after telling world leaders that trade is being used as a weapon. President Trump last month imposed a 30% tariff on imports from the country. The South African leader also said a trade arrangement with the U.S. that has been in place for the past 25 years should continue. It was scheduled to end this month.
Something huge just happened in global trade, and the United States is on the back foot. A major trade program meant to pressure Africa has completely backfired, and South Africa, leading the continent, is turning this challenge into an historic win. African industries are thriving, regional trade is exploding, and new global partnerships are reshaping the economic landscape. Meanwhile, United States exporters are losing ground, and decades of influence are slipping away. This isn't just a setback, it's a game-changing moment proving Africa is stronger, smarter, and more self-reliant than ever.
In a stunning turn of global economic strategy, the United States has taken a bold step that was meant to assert leverage over African markets. The end of a long-standing trade program was intended as a calculated move to pressure African nations into compliance with economic expectations and alignments. Instead, what unfolded has become one of the most remarkable strategic miscalculations of the decade. Rather than bending under the threat, African nations, led decisively by South Africa, have not only absorbed the impact, but have transformed it into a historic opportunity for continental self-reliance, economic innovation, and diplomatic assertiveness. The anticipated collapse of African industries never came. Instead, a powerful narrative of resilience and regional empowerment has emerged, rewriting the rules of global trade and influence. South Africa's leadership in this scenario has been nothing short of visionary. Confronted with a sudden and potentially destabilizing shift in trade relations, the nation immediately pivoted from dependency to proactive strategy. Industrial sectors, previously oriented toward United States markets, were rapidly recalibrated toward regional and global partners willing to engage in mutually beneficial trade. Supply chains were restructured, partnerships were diversified, and a wave of innovation swept through manufacturing and export sectors. Far from faltering, African industries showcased remarkable adaptability, proving that self-reliance is not just a theoretical aspiration, but a tangible, actionable reality. The broader African continent has followed this lead with striking cohesion. Regional trade agreements and cross-border initiatives, once often discussed in abstract policy terms, have now taken center stage as the driving force of economic survival and growth. Markets that were predicted to shrink under the pressure of United States disengagement instead expanded, supported by intra-African commerce, collaborative industrial networks, and an ambitious pivot toward emerging global economies. Africa's ability to harness its own resources, talent, and creativity has accelerated dramatically, leaving critics of the continent's industrial potential scrambling to reassess their assumptions. This pivot has not been limited to production alone. Strategic diplomacy has flourished alongside economic adaptation. African nations have skillfully navigated a landscape that could have been dominated by uncertainty, forging partnerships with new international players eager to engage with the continent on terms that reflect mutual respect and benefit. Instead of dependency, Africa has established a more assertive position on the global stage, signaling to the world that the continent is capable of charting its own path, even when confronted with pressure from historically dominant economic powers. The move has elevated Africa from a passive participant in global trade to a decisive actor shaping international economic discourse. While Africa adapts and thrives, the United States finds itself facing unintended consequences that may resonate for years. Exporters who once enjoyed preferential access to African markets are now encountering rapidly shifting trade flows, increased competition from other global partners, and the loss of a once dominant foothold in key industries. Long-term influence, cultivated over decades of economic and diplomatic engagement, is being challenged as African nations demonstrate that they can thrive without reliance on a single superpower. The strategic leverage the United States sought to wield has dissolved into a cautionary tale about the limits of unilateral economic pressure in a rapidly evolving global marketplace. The narrative unfolding across Africa is one of empowerment, ingenuity, and decisive action. industries once presumed vulnerable have proven resilient, navigating logistical challenges with ingenuity and leveraging regional collaboration to maintain and even expand market share. Agricultural producers, manufacturers, and service providers are discovering new avenues for growth, whether through regional trade, investment in local infrastructure, or partnerships with countries eager to diversify away from traditional power centers. The continent is not merely reacting to external pressure. It is proactively designing a model of growth that emphasizes sustainability, self-reliance, and continental solidarity. South Africa's central role cannot be overstated. Acting as both a hub and a catalyst, it has demonstrated that strategic vision, decisive policy, and agile leadership can convert potential setbacks into profound wins. By fostering regional networks, investing in innovation, and positioning itself as a conduit for African progress, the nation has set a precedent that others across the continent are now following. This moment represents more than just a national success. It signals the emergence of a new era in African economic leadership, one in which nations act in concert to safeguard their interests, amplify their voices, and assert their role on the global stage. The consequences for the United States are equally undeniable. Its sudden withdrawal from a trade framework has not only disrupted its own exporters, but has inadvertently accelerated the rise of competitors who now occupy the space the United States once dominated. Long-term access to African markets, once considered secure, now faces uncertainty as African nations continue to diversify their economic partners and embrace strategies that reduce reliance on external actors. Influence, once reinforced through economic channels, is now being recalibrated by African agency, ingenuity, and strategic foresight. This unfolding dynamic is redefining the concept of global power balance. Economic influence is no longer the sole domain of traditional superpowers. Africa's response demonstrates that strategic planning, regional cohesion, and adaptability can turn perceived weaknesses into formidable strengths. By embracing self-reliance and innovation, African nations are asserting a level of control over their economic destiny that is reshaping expectations on the international stage. The continent's rise is not a fleeting phenomenon, but a profound reconfiguration of trade, diplomacy, and industrial capability. The story of African resilience extends beyond immediate economic recalibration. It encompasses a broader vision of continental unity, forward-looking industrial policy, and ambitious global engagement. Countries across Africa are seizing this moment to redefine their relationship with the world, building alliances based on reciprocity and mutual growth rather than dependency. African leaders are demonstrating that economic foresight, coupled with decisive action, can transform a moment of potential vulnerability into a landmark achievement in continental empowerment. The lessons for the United States are stark. Attempts to exert influence through sudden withdrawal or unilateral pressure may produce short-term headlines, but in a world of rapidly diversifying trade networks and rising global actors, such tactics can backfire spectacularly. Africa's response serves as a case study in strategic resilience, revealing that economic self-determination and regional collaboration can counterbalance even the most powerful external pressures. In effect, the intended leverage has been converted into an enduring lesson on the limits of unilateral economic influence. Africa's industries are not merely surviving, they are thriving. Innovation in manufacturing, logistics, agriculture, and services is accelerating, while regional trade initiatives create a self-sustaining ecosystem that diminishes the impact of external disruptions. The continent is actively shaping its own narrative, one that emphasizes autonomy, regional solidarity, and long-term prosperity. Rather than a continent defined by dependency, Africa is emerging as a dynamic center of global economic vitality, proving that strategic foresight and decisive leadership can redefine historical assumptions. This moment represents more than a single policy miscalculation by the United States. It marks a turning point in Africa's rise. The continent is not waiting for permission or opportunity from external powers. It is creating its own framework for growth, leadership, and global engagement. South Africa's pivotal role exemplifies how decisive, visionary leadership can catalyze continental transformation, setting a precedent for other nations to follow. The outcome is a profound affirmation of African capability, creativity, and strategic agency. In the end, the narrative is clear. What was meant as pressure has become a testament to African ingenuity and resilience. The continent is emerging stronger, more self-reliant, and increasingly influential on the global stage. Industries are thriving, regional trade is accelerating, and diplomatic partnerships are being redefined to reflect Africa's rising agency. Meanwhile, the United States is grappling with unintended consequences that highlight the complexities of exerting influence in a world where power is increasingly distributed. Africa's response to this challenge is not only a win, it is a strategic revolution. It signals to the world that the continent is capable of shaping its own destiny, harnessing its resources, and building partnerships that reinforce growth, stability, and independence. The lesson is clear. Attempts to control or pressure Africa may yield headlines, but the continent's determination, cohesion, and ingenuity ensure that it will continue to rise, stronger and more resilient than ever. The legacy of this moment will be remembered not for the short-term disruption it caused, but for the enduring empowerment it catalyzed. Africa is no longer defined by external expectations. It is defined by its own vision, strength, and capacity to transform challenges into historic victories. The continent has proven that strategic foresight, leadership, and regional collaboration can turn adversity into unprecedented opportunity. In a world still adjusting to this new reality, one truth stands above all. Africa has emerged stronger than ever, and the future belongs to those who dare to shape it.